Well, okay, welcome everybody to this research seminar with our own Josef Hien. He's going to talk about cultural political economy and crisis of economic. So Josef is a political science and researcher here at the Institute. How many years have you been here now?
Forever.
Forever, okay, that's very good. But otherwise at Mid-Sweden University. And does a lot of research on the connection between political economic institutions, religion, ideologies, and cultures. Got his PhD from the European University Institute in Florence in 2012 on a thesis competing ideas, the religious foundations of the German and Italian welfare state, which I guess is very interesting to contrast with the Swedish welfare state. And he has published about that, but also quite recently about something that is quite pertinent in Sweden today. Public broadcasting and democracy defense, responses to far-right parties in Germany and Sweden, which is something that is very current here now in Sweden with the new ideas about what we're going to do with public broadcasting. At any rate, the floor is yours. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And the dissertation, actually, this is funnily is coming out now with Cambridge.
I'm even later than you. So
just submitted it on Wednesday, so I still have to recover from that. And it only took me, what, 12 years.
I forgot to bring up your fencing achievements too, but I'll do that next time.
Yeah, there I've also been this weekend in Belgium on the European Championships, and on my pant I have the sticker that says Institute for Future Studies.
Yes, extremely happy.
Important. Okay, thank you so much for letting me present. I'm very happy that you're all here. So, title is The Impact of the Catholic-Protestant Divide on European Economic Integration. And this is like a bit like a heterodox take on European integration, especially on economic European integration, because usually what you have are these takes on European integration. So this is the classic Ernst B. Haas, no, functionalism, then the choice for Europe, which is Andrew Moravcik's take on interests that propelled European integration, you know, I mean, like companies and so on, they needed more that governments work together and so on, and that's why European integration came about. Or then there's Joe Weiler, and a lawyer that says it's all about law, and law basically integrated itself into the European Union. My take is very different, as you saw before, because it's basically a cultural interpretation. So it's about religion, it's about ideas, it's about, one could say, ideologies, economic ideologies that have pushed European integration. So it's I don't say these people are wrong, but I say I have a different kind of view on it. And this I will introduce now. And you can see my ideology that I'm following mostly through, since the 1950s, is Christian democracy. And Christian democracy had a huge stake in integrating the European Union. So here you can see from 1957, this is Alice De Gasperi, the prime minister back then in Italy. And he is celebrating on posters and manifestos the Roman Treaty. And he says, vogliamo fare una politica internazionale senza nazionalismi. So we want to make an international politics without nationalism. So we want to get rid of nationalisms. Ma con la fede nella nuova Europa. But with like trust, or kind of our trust in a new Europe. It's like una utopia. It's a utopia, but one that brings in the end salvare la pace, that helps us to recover peace for a long time. And he was Christian Democrat, and he was Catholic, and that was kind of like his view on this. And here you have another picture on this, La firma dei trattati per il mercato comune and Eurozone. So it was very much celebrated back then on big manifestos. Nobody would do this today any longer. And also in other countries, like in the Christian Democratic Union in Germany, Mit uns für Europa and so on, they celebrated, and then the Italians again. So they were pushing this project. This is the newest one, I think. Frieden ist nicht selbstverständlich, so peace is not, must not come about at all kind of necessary means, but you have to work for it through a European Union. This is from the Christian Democratic Union. And then you see this old Reichstagsgebäude bombed out for 45, and then Now we have the new one, and we have it because we have the European Union. So here you can see just some markers why Christian democracy is important. And indeed, if you look into history books of European Union, then you can see that it was actually driven by Christian Democrats. De Gasperi again, Konrad Adenauer, and Schumann. And they had these informal ties between one another in which they organized themselves along party line and Catholic lines about how Europe should look like and who should be part of it. And as you can see, Sweden is not part in 52, but it is France, the Benelux countries, West Germany, and Italy. And that was their idea. That's it. That's what we need. We don't need more. And we want exactly this as a federal construct for European
Sorry,
integration.
question, clarification. Why did they exclude the other Catholic countries?
Yeah, but because these were dictatorial regimes, and this was East.
So then, but they had aspirations, no?
They have aspirations, absolutely, and then they came also in the 1980s. Okay, so if you then look into what these people were thinking about how Europe should look like, then you can read it out. This is Schumann, so it's original outline of a united Europe was that of a Christian medieval Europe under a twin authority. So that was the old Europe, no? A spiritual one personified by the papacy and a temporal one embodied by the emperor, head of the Holy Roman Empire. So that was their idea. We have to go back basically to the Holy Roman Empire to have a peace-resting existence in Europe. And this united withered after more than 6 centuries of existence when the evil Renaissance came and gave us a nice idea, which weakened religious ties, and then came even worse, the Reformation. So Protestantism spurred up, and this disrupted religious unity, and the empire lost its prestige to newly sovereign nation states. So Europe split into a large group of states whose interests and aims conflicted to such a degree that fierce battles ensured. And by this you mean First World War, Second World War, Holocaust, everything. No? Everything went to hell. So the idea of them is we just have to restore what was before this nation state, and this is what they are trying. And Konrad Adenauer had a similar understanding. So since the founding of the German Empire under Prussian supremacy, and Prussia is a Protestant state, you know, the state transformed, and he was Catholic, so he did not really like this, into a sovereign machine. The great external success of the big Bismarckian Empire, the spread of the materialist Weltanschauung among the German people. The materialist Weltanschauung necessarily led to the excessive isolation or Überhöhung of the state and of power, and to the devaluation of ethical values and the dignity of the individual. You get into this state machinery, which then in the end basically becomes for these people in the interpretation the Nazi regime. Yes? This is a very good... thank you for saving me. Because I actually did not really know how to translate this one. But it's one of these words that Weber...
So we can ask a question of clarification, but ask for the microphone when you want to ask a question of clarification.
It's like if you say Gestalt or something. Okay, so out of this Adenauer, De Gasperi, Schumann ideas that one can pick up through different quotes and so on, comes a concept of Europe that I have already told you how it should look like. It should look like the Abendland. And the Abendland is the old Christian core Europe, the Carolingian Empire, before the Reformation and before Renaissance and everything. So it's this. Here, West Germany. Huh?
And again, point out, without Spain and Portugal.
It really looks like the early European Union in 1952. There was a Catholic idea within Christian democracy, but then there is, of course, also a Protestant idea within Christian democracy, and it's very different from the Catholic idea. So the Protestant side was covered, especially in German Christian democracy in the 1950s and 60s, by people like Ludwig Erhard. And they really did not like the Catholic idea of integration. They wanted more like a free trade zone with the UK, US, the Nordics, a nation state-based Europe, not a federal Europe. No supranational integration. Erhard called this group around Adenauer Europe romantics and opposed Adenauer's integration command, what he called Integrationsbefehl, and Erhard called the community of the 6 small European inbreeding, kleine europäische Inzucht, and economic nonsense. Erhard warned of planned economy and dirigist tendencies. Where should they come from? Yeah, they come when you work together with the French, because they had like 5-year plans in the 50s and the 60s and so on. So they were very afraid of this. And in contrast, for Adenauer, European integration was instead a political necessity. So this was, one was a loose federation, the other one was a federal situation. One was basically get rid of the nation state, the other one was enforce the nation state in a kind of like a collaborative conglomerate. Now, Erhard also had economic advisors, many, and this is the so-called order liberal school. So here you can see this order liberal front figure, Wilhelm Röpke, and he was writing all the time in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung against the plan of Adenauer to integrate Europe. And he said, again, with this like French tune, the French influence prompted the European Economic Commission to request that the French form of soft planned economy be extended to all the countries of the common market. And this he really did not like from his like ideological position of an order liberal economist. And there were also other Protestant commentators, so you get it also in the UK. So Peter Tapsell, House of Commons member, he says, sometimes I lie there in the bathtub now, and wonder how we can be prepared to hand over the control of our central bank to a group of foreigners under German domination. I wonder what King William III would have thought about that when he drew up the original charter of the Bank of England. And John Mayer, similar, it is for nations to build Europe, not for Europe to attempt to supersede nations. And Niels Matthiesen, Danish Social Democracy Party secretary and minister in 1957, he said, well, as a member of the common market, we would become the 7th country in a union dominated by the Catholic Church and right-wing political movements. It serves no purpose to claim that the Danish concept of democracy is the same as the German, the French, or the Italian. It is evident that Danish democracy and political life are based on a different foundation, equaling to some extent what you find in Britain, and in certain respects in Canada and the US, but first and foremost in other Nordic countries. This interpretation, I think, is absolutely true after like living here for 5 years. This is very strong. And it is a cultural kind of setting oneself apart from continental Europe that have far-reaching implications for the European integration project. And Robert Schuman, the Catholic Christian Democrat, answered, well, the UK was insular and cosmopolitan, traditional and instinctively distrustful of any ideological innovation and hostile on principle and in all circumstances to any form of integration or federal structure. So they were, both sides were aware of this like big problem and scission, but somehow they got away with it and they kind of integrated the European Union to a certain extent till the 1990s. So this was so far a take on what they thought about states and integration structures. Should it be federal? Should it be more nation state built? Who should be included? Who should be out? And so on. And that was a very different take. Now we go into what does this all mean for economic policy and economic integration. And there we look at the 1980s and the 1990s, or to the Maastricht negotiations. And here we see a young Helmut Kohl behind Adenauer. And he became chancellor in 1982. He took over the Christian Democratic Party already before. And Kohl's aim, he was also Catholic, and his big role model was Adenauer. Kohl's idea was to reinvent himself as a historic chancellor who had completed Adenauer's work. So Kohl thought that Adenauer had pushed this quite far, but not far enough, because it had not become a federal union, and Kohl now wanted to bring it home, basically. And this is Kohl's dissertation from 1958 in Ruprecht Karls Universität zu Heidelberg. It's a history dissertation. It's in there, they say, when you talk to people in Heidelberg, they say it's in the Giftschrank. It's kind of hidden away so that nobody can find it, only a few copies and so on. I think one can by now read it also online, because many people are, of course, afraid of plagiarism. And so what he tackles here is the question of political reorganization of Germany, West Germany, in light of the end of the Second World War, and how can it come to a reconciliation between France and Germany in this border region where Kohl comes from, yeah, in Rheinland-Pfalz. And you can see it here, so die Frage der deutschen Westgrenze und das Rheinland-Problem in der alliierten Deutschland-Politik. So how can you reconcile with France and rebuild political structures in this region and also cross borderly, yeah? Frankreich's Deutschland-Politik, also French-German politics, and the eastern border of France and so on. So with this, I just want to show you this guy has really thought about this. I mean, he has his own interpretation about how it should kind of be solved and where this all should go. And very early on, he had done this in 1958. And the end result is this. It's the Maastricht Treaty. So that was his idea. So why don't we fix up like an economic treaty and an economic integration zone, plus also maybe a common currency that makes it irreversible, the European integration. You cannot just undo it. And you make it irreversible with the currency union. Because the EMU would help him, or would help Kohl, to irrevocably to bind Germany to the community by means of EMU. Germans becoming all of a sudden good Europeans. So it's a long history trip from Holocaust, Second World War, to dissolving in the European Union and not being able to harm the continent any longer. The problem was, of course, there was also a contra side. So there was the pro side with Kohl head, and there was a contra side. And this contra side was consistent mostly out of Protestants and ordo liberal economists. And it was basically the financial elite, I mean, the state financial elite, so the Bundesbank with Karl Otto Pöhl, Hans Tietmeyer, the Ministry of Finance with Gerhard Stoltenberg. And it's all in the Christian Democratic Party as well, connected, and the Netherlands. And then there was the pro side, which was the Bundeskanzleramt, the Foreign Ministry, Helmut Kohl, Genscher, Italy, and France. In the end, this side won. We got the euro, and these people stepped back from their positions. And they kind of tried to fix it with the Maastricht Treaty, with kind of the convergence criteria and whatnot, to make like having a grid of more stability, but it did not really work out for them. What lies behind all this, the Protestant and the Catholic side, is a different idea of political economy, of individual economic incentives, but also collective economic, in not only incentives, but also like how people act economically. And what lies behind the difference between Calvinism, Lutheranism, and Catholicism, and maybe also Orthodoxy, which would then be here, are the different ascendance models. How do you go to heaven? And in all of these Christian branches, you have different incentives how to go to heaven. So here extreme work, here a little bit less work, and here they don't really care so much about work. So it's a very simplified. Now, of course, there are tons of books behind it and so on. So here it's constant toil, work of any type in the name of God. And then in the Weber thesis, this brings you to capitalism. And here you have repent, confess indulgences, good work, you help the other people out and so on. And this leads, according to Weber, to traditional jog trot. Nothing happens in these societies and so on and so forth. So what you have, according to Max Weber, is like these elective affinities. No, it matches somehow together what you have for economic behavior and economic outcome and these Christian religions. So norms influencing human behavior and interaction, and all this is not bound to religion per se, but it gets stipulated by religion, and then there's a transposition process that also kind of lets people follow the same behavior in a secular world. A kind of, you can see this even in what these Christian democratic politicians, where this conflict was a virulence all the time in the party, because it was Catholic and Protestants in one party, how they solved this. In the 1950s and 60s, German post-war economics was a compromise of economic ideas of both confessions, of Protestantism and Catholicism. The Protestants, they got the Cartel law, so a lot of economic competition and so on, a federal bank law, and German Council of Economic Experts. And the Catholics on the other side, they got a huge welfare state, co-determination, corporatism, collective wage bargaining, autonomy. This is the, Norbert Blüm is the former social minister of Germany here. And here you have like the Bundesbank and the other institutions that the Protestants got. So institutionally, this was not only something the people thought, but it was also institutions they enacted, they reinforced themselves, and covered then there in the 1990s. So you could see the euro by now, and this is this book by these Princeton economists and historians. So as the euro is the birth as a struggle between Northern, but above all German, and what is sometimes called Southern, but above all French economic theories. So the Northern vision is about rules, rigor, and consistency, while the Southern emphasis is on the need for flexibility, adaptability, and innovation. It is Kant versus Machiavelli and rules versus discretion. I mean, they were not totally right with this, because Germany itself was already like a mix out of these two ideologies, but it was then played in the 1990s and 2000s as something that was completely, basically, Lutheran or Calvinist mixed Protestant Northern. So if we jump now to the euro crisis, this is something where then all of a sudden a new term pops up. I named it already, like we mentioned it already twice, ordoliberalism. So this is The Guardian, this is The Economist, Financial Times. Everyone in Europe outside of Germany was super angry about the German position enforcing basically austerity in Southern European member states, and saying, no, you have to reform all your institutions. This welfare state should go away. You don't need so much solidarity. You have to kind of schrumpf dich gesund. Yeah? You have to kind of starve yourself to health, more or less. These people got angry. They did not know why Germany was doing that, because economically it was a huge damage for Germany. But then they found out there is this strange economic theory in Germany that's prevalent in the bureaucracy and in economics, and this is called ordoliberalism. So the Eurozone will pay a high price for Germany's economic narcissism. German ordoliberalism has had a big influence on policy during the Euro crisis, and the Financial Times even called it the wacky economics of Germany's parallel universe. And not even like the newspapers kind of called it like that, but also the holy trinity of German social science thought that. So this is Fritz Scharpf, this is Habermas, this is Wolfgang Streeck. And there you could see, so it's about ordoliberalism, it's about ordoliberalism, it's about ordoliberalism. And it's not only what politicians are deciding, but it's also what they have enacted. So the monetary union took a shape in accordance with the ordoliberal ideas of the Stability and Growth Pact and so on and so forth. this pushed a huge academic debate on order liberalism, how much influence it had, what is it actually, because before the European crisis, nobody knew what it was, not even in Germany. I mean, only a couple of few people in Freiburg and so on. Huge push in publications. And what is it actually? Well, order liberalism, this is how you could apply it to the building of the European Union, especially the economic side, is, well, you should not have any interventionist politics into the economy. So politics should not interfere. The economics should be bulletproof, basically, shielded from political influence. And this would be what you then see with like a technocratic commission that you have in the European Union. Every society should have a small but influential group of leaders who feel themselves to be the whole community guardians. What we need is a true nobilitas naturalis. So there was this like special experts that should run this without political responsibility. And you would have an independent central bank that is not under the influence of the government, and you have a stability and growth pact, so you have strong rules that ensure that everyone is playing according to what they should be doing. A six-pack, no, which you also got, so the economic system has to be like a undestroyable toy, basically, should be foolproof. No European Union welfare state, because this would distort the economic incentives for individuals. Everyone would go total catastrophe for state and society, they thought the welfare state was. And the EU competition policy is very central. So you ensure the best competition between companies and so on, and this would generate the best gain. But for them, really important is that you don't run into corporatism. So the policy of the state should be focused on dissolving economic power groups or at limiting their function. Background is the story that how they interpreted the fall of the Weimar Republic. So they thought that the Weimar Republic had been eaten up by political powers that enforced a very strong corporatism and welfare state, and that there were many basically the state finances plus economic competition was completely disabled during the time, and that's why you then ended up with the Nazis and everything really bad. I mean, these people, these order liberals, were a resistance group in Freiburg, and they were thinking in the 1930s and in the 1940s already how to reformulate the economic society of West Germany after the war. It is basically a special type of German neoliberalism. A neoliberalism in which the state is very important. The state is not allowed to enact anything in political economy, but it is allowed to shield the economic system and the competitive system from anyone who wants to interfere and who wants to foul play. What is usually not mentioned is that these people were all hardcore Protestants at the beginning. And you can really read this in the diaries, in the letters that they wrote to one another and so on. So there were, in this group meeting in Freiburg, there were Protestant theologians, Otto Dibelius, Konstantin von Dietze, who were the presents and so on. Here you see him with Martin Luther and Willy Brandt. Here's with Adenauer. And then Protestant economists like Walter Eucken, Leonhard Miksch, and Adolf Lampe, and Protestant lawyers, Franz Böhm, Hans Grossmann. That lawyers were very important in this economic theory because they had to enforce all these rules and laws that were set up. And then you had Protestant historians like Gerhard Ritter, the German post-war master historian. And so you can then, during the Eurozone crisis, make a split between the southern PIIGS, no, as they were called by the newspapers, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain, those with heavy economic problems back then, and the northern saints. One side Protestant, the other side is Catholic and Orthodox. And so you can also split them then up on the different values. So individual, also here is the ascetic Protestant Lutheranism, Catholic Orthodoxy. Here you have brother love, familialist, solidarity, Christian socialism. And here you have more individualism, help to induce self-help, fear of moral hazards. And then you can group the crisis countries at different points in time there. So here are the southern countries, and then Greek, and these are all the debtors, and here are the creditors. And then for the last picture, so if you have the Catholics here, then you can draw a line from different social encyclicas that you had in the 19th century on solidarity towards Oswald von Nell-Bräunding, who was the biggest Catholic social philosopher after the Second World War in Germany and big involved with the Christian Democratic Party, then to the Gasperi, the Adenauer and Schumann, and then a young Helmut Kohl. So this is one line of Christian democratic economic thought, which is more involved with the welfare state, welfarist, solidarity, and corporatism. And on the other side, you have the Lutheran and then the Calvinist thinking, who it goes more in the order liberal dimension of Walter Eucken and then Ludwig Erhard, and then into Merkel and then Kurt Biedenkopf. And you could also maybe put here even like a small Alexander Stubb or a Dutch prime minister, like Rutte or something like that, who would be on that side. And this created clashes during the Eurozone crisis. So you interpret this as a new 30 years war between Catholics and Protestants in the North and South. And I think, yeah, one can actually, because if you look into all the speeches that our German finance minister gave back then, Wolfgang Schäuble, then you can see the same arguments as Luther was putting forward, and partly also Calvin. No one should live idle on the work of others. He that will not work, let him not eat. And he said, Athens is behaving quite irresponsible. The problem is that Greece has lived beyond its means. So when they both talked about solidarity, the Greek prime minister and the German finance minister, they were all saying we need more solidarity. Yeah, well, he had a completely different understanding of it, which was more like a Calvinist Protestant Lutheran understanding, which is more about self-responsibility. Don't give them too much. If you give them too much, they can't climb out of their like hole anymore. So it has to be very little. Well, he had a more like encompassing, brother-loving solidarity thing. And this led then to a whole avalanche of gray literature. Bild-Zeitung is our biggest German newspaper. And there you have it, that heute brauchen wir die eiserne Kanzlerin, today we need the iron chancellor to fend them off the Greeks. Keine neuen Milliarden für Griechenland, no more billions for Greece. And Griechen wollen unser Geld, they want our money. And the euro lie. So haben uns die Griechen reingelegt. This is how the Greek people cheated us or screwed us over. And also the Quality Press back then had a similar take on it. So focus said Betrüger in the Euro-Familie. So there are the cheaters in the Euro family. And so this is Greece, but what about Spain, Portugal, and Italy? And the Armutslüge, so this is the poverty lie. They are selling us that they are poor, but actually they are not, because they are hiding their stuff. So you have this donkey, Greek guy on top with the euro umbrella, and he's losing all these euro bills out of his like baskets. And yeah, I mean, that's basically what this topic was about. If one can kind of draw this huge or large line of economic behavior, economic interpretations, all this like stereotypes and so on, from the 15th century till today. And it goes not only into the Bild-Zeitung, but it also goes into economists, into economic theory, into bureaucracies, and so on and so forth. And the idea is to make a book out of this. it's almost done already. But chapter 1 would be an introduction to cultural, political economy, and European crisis coalitions. So this is like to oppose this to like a more neo-Marxian approach, which is usually common by now. Religious sociology of the European Union, then a Protestant connection of ordoliberalism, what I just have explained, and then the influence of ordoliberalism on institutions of the monetary union and the EPP. Chapter 5 is then the crisis, is the Eurozone, and then really interesting is that in the COVID crisis, exactly the same thing happens again. Do you want debt mutualization between European countries, yes or no? And you usually always have the same countries opposing other countries, and so you don't get it. You don't get the Eurobonds, and then a conclusion. So just to say, I mean, it's not that I just blah blah this here. This builds on years of research, which is published in many different papers that you can read. We also did 2 books on it, and so on and so forth. And yeah, it is something to understand economic theory, economic positions of governments, but also this. So this 0 was done for Schäuble when he resigned. Also he did not resign, but like it was over for him after like 15,000 terms of finance minister. They did a big 0 as a symbol, I mean his employees, this is in the finance ministry's court, to symbolize how good he was with householding the finances. That was the big thank you. And wir stehen zu unserem Fetisch is what the Christian Democrats use to make election campaigns, and it just symbolizes that they really like the black 0, which means we don't make any debt any longer. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, Joseph. We're going to have the question and answer period. As usual, we have people online. You can write your question in the chat. And we also allow for follow-ups. Then you write follow-up and the person you're following up to. And since we are a mix of different disciplines, please also write your discipline, because we like to mix questions from different areas. We will start with some questions here, and we first start with Professor Svalfors.
Thank you for a fascinating presentation. I wonder what role does the other big political force in Europe, social democracy, play in your story? It seems to be, it has to be intertwined somehow. But is it the stories that you are telling, is that kind of superimposed on the rise and fall of social democracy, or is that a different story? I'm not sure.
It's a super good question and a very hard one. I think at the beginning, social democracy was pretty much against European integration in the 1950s and 1960s. There comes then only a turn in the 1970s. And then they become more pro-European integration, have to carve positions on it. I will have to look into it, but it is superimposed. So this is like kind of a Weltenformel, a meta-narrative that, and under this you can then subsume all the kind of things. Yeah.
Yes, then Schubert.
Thank you. So I'm Stefan Schubert. I'm a researcher in philosophy and psychology. So yeah, you have this thesis that like Lutheranism or Protestantism more generally it emphasizes self-reliance. You quoted Luther that like he who does not work shall not eat, and that lives on today. And so that's interesting. But like, how would you then explain like the Scandinavian welfare states? Like it seems like during the 20th century, like actually Lutheran countries in Scandinavia built some of the largest welfare states. So yeah, how would you explain that?
Yeah, so the very good questions, and I always get into trouble with it, but the so one would say in welfare state literature, and I think this is also quite right, that if you take a pure religious how do you go to heaven and religious ideas take on it, then it would be Calvinism leads you more to like a US type of thing, or a one could also say a Swiss one, so very limited welfare state, a basic kind of arrangement. Then the Lutheran one gives you a very good welfare state, but it's very state dominated. No, I mean, this is not the case now anymore in Sweden, but like the state holds the infrastructure and kind of like gives out a universal type of welfare state model for everyone. While the Catholic one is much more fragmented. It is detached from the state because of bad experience with state-church conflicts in the 19th century, but then also with fascism and so on. So you want to kind of keep the state at bay. You take money from the state, but you deliver it to the people through different organizations. So this would be the basic kind of thing. What happens here is kind of a mix in order liberalism out of Calvinist ideas and Lutheran ideas, and it's yeah, I mean that the Swedish welfare state or the Danish welfare state and so on became so strong is, I would interpret, a mix out of Lutheranism, a big belief in the state, a big kind of control mechanism vis-a-vis other citizens so that they don't cheat, plus social democracy, which comes in.
Happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting response. Like, I mean, it's a hugely complex issue, so I'm not sure it's like worthwhile to continue pursuing right now. But
it's I also think it's usually interesting, and it has not really been studied in the Nordic cases that much,
Right.
because it was social democracy, bam, and then they expand.
Yeah.
Maybe I could follow up on that, because I
Yeah.
had exactly the same question. I don't think the Scandinavian countries fit your kind of model of explanation so well. Usually said that one reason for the kind of stronger welfare state in the Nordic countries is that they didn't have the same kind of economical development with feudalism, especially in Sweden, Norway, and Finland. There was not feudalism, and a little bit less, so Denmark a bit more so. And this kind of created an order with a lot of self-owning farmers and more egalitarian ethos. That doesn't figure at all, so say, this kind of more economic structural explanations. But if it could also be combined with your more, religious explanation, and explain why there is a difference. As compared to Germany, it was a very feudal state, and etc.
Exactly. So if it depends where you start. Now, if you start from the individual and individual incentives at the beginning, then this would fit very well. So why was there basically an equal society already before the welfare
More
state?
so.
No,
Yeah.
and then this must come from somewhere. And then some people say, yeah, we were all farmers and so on. But you could say you're all Lutherans, and
Another I haven't thought is true is that the churches in the Scandinavian countries were state agents and very controlled by the state from an early after the Reformation.
Yeah.
And that also perhaps makes a bit of a difference.
So the early appeasement of a church-state conflict is very important. So in Italy, this basically only ends, I mean, it did not end till today, basically, but like in late 19th century, the same in Germany, huge conflict, not only between state and church, the Catholic Church and the state, but also between the two churches, Protestant church in the Prussian state plus the Catholic Church that was suppressed.
Okay. Yeah, but I think next on the list is now Karim. Huh?
Yeah. Thanks. So this was, super interesting. So I had a question looking forward to the future. So with the Brexit, the EU lost a prominent Protestant country, and with the EU enlargement, many of the countries who joined were Catholic, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, and so on. So how do you expect this to change the kind of political dynamics or in this picture? And is there, and maybe more specifically, like, is the Eastern Catholicism of the new countries, is it aligned with the kind of Central European Catholicism, or is it kind of a different flavor of Catholicism?
You answered it. No, I mean, like, this is absolutely, yeah, it's an extremely good question. I've thought about it. Okay, the first thing that I have to say, this is a story of the past. This is over. This is like, I mean, the secularization is diffusing all this, and even, so like a Christian Democratic Party is called Christian Democratic with a C for Christianity. They don't really know what to do with it anymore. And they have all the time discussions about it. Huh? So that's one thing. The second thing is that, nevertheless, I think for interpreting the past and what's still happening, it's still important. Eastern Central Europe and the Catholicism is quite different because it comes out of this communist suppression of basically 50 years that try to get rid of this as quick as possible, and then they get their new nation state again, and I was like, yeah, cool, we will not give this away to a more like pan-national Catholic kind of feeling or so on. And in this falls then also their interpretation of the European Union. So they were very fond of their nation state. They want to keep this. So it's a very different interpretation of Catholicism.
And I suppose that the Christian Democratic Party, there are no big Christian Democratic parties in the former communist countries.
No. I mean, Orban calls the Fidesz a Christian Democratic Party, but that was more like a marketing trick, I would say. And you also have no Christian Democratic Party anymore in Spain or in Portugal. The one in Greece also a little bit like maybe not so really. Yeah.
You follow up on that, yeah. So I mean, you said this in the past, but I mean, it's still. You mean that it's not a fracture line? This kind of.
It's
Catholic,
not something
Protestant
that will predict the future.
But you could also say that it's still a fracture line, but we have another fracture line, which is the East Europe living under communism and Western Europe, and that's another one that might, complicate matters even more. So, but that doesn't mean that the other fracture line has disappeared.
That's true. It has not disappeared, but I don't see it coming back with the same force. I mean, the people really believed it. The voters believed it. The priests.
Because you said it appeared during COVID. That's not very far away.
Yeah.
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 So when did it? Or maybe I'm misunderstanding. I mean.
No, not at all. But I mean, okay, politics is a generational business.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy as well. It depends when you got trained in your economics, when you got trained in your upbringing and so on, and when this fuses away. When the youngs come.
So let me then, of course, and this might be very true, that when the people in power and in the bureaucracy were still very marked by the experience of the Second World War,
yes,
that is now disappearing.
That is now disappearing.
Yeah. And that's an important thing that we see. Yeah.
This is disappearing. I think also the people that were on top level positions in German bureaucratic institutions, like in the finance minister or the economics minister, they're retiring now.
Mm-hmm.
You see also those that are the oldest have the highest position and so on. And come new ones. And they have different training. And they might be trained in the US. They might be, So it's like a microsociological kind of study, basically, that you would need to say that. But my hunch is that it still exists. But, I mean, Ebba Busch, is she a Christian Democrat?
Or the American style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she has renewed it, basically, in that sense.
They might change it. Okay, Chandra. The microphone. Microphone's on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So I just want you to elaborate a bit more on what you mean by a neo-Weberian framework of cultural political economy as a kind of explanatory framework. And before you answer, let me just raise an issue that I came across a while ago. It had to do with the rise of Protestantism in Germany and Luther and the Weberian connection of that to capitalism. But some people have pointed out that at the same time there was another Protestant named Thomas Müntzer, and he was equally Protestant, but he was opposed to Luther. and he led the peasant uprisings in Germany, and he was captured and tortured and beheaded, and Luther's version of Protestantism won out. And so some people say, look, Weber can't explain why this version won out rather than the other version. But if you put these cultural debates in the context of a class background, then it becomes much more intelligible. And that's a kind of Marxian critique of Weberian framework. So that's the context in which I'm asking you that question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And so like my idea is just to turn it around again. So I mean, neo-Marxists had big advances in political economy, especially since the 19, I mean, Klaus off and whatnot. And I think that they forgot a bit culture. Because it's a fused thing, no? I mean, what is this? How can we study it? We cannot really measure it, and so on. We can describe it, but and so on and so forth. And now, at the moment, we see in politics the culture is big again. It's about them against us, no? All populist movements and so on and so forth. So I think there is something to try it out again. And I'm not saying it's better than a Marxist or a class-based approach. It's also not better than an institutional approach, but I think it's a complementary approach. That's what I would say. And this would also be what Weber's intention, I think, was from the beginning. So you have what drives individuals, but you also have their class base, but you also have the institutions in which they are structured. So it's like these three. Yeah.
Happy with that, Chandra? Yeah. Then we have Marcus, all the way in the back. Stand it back.
Okay, thanks a lot. Very interesting. So I have a two-part question. The first is about methodology, I guess, and the second one is about generalizability. So you already touched upon this in your last exchange with Gustav, but I wonder about the sort of micro-level explanations in the theory that you present. So could you say anything more about what it is that makes varieties of Christianity, what it is that produces the different results? So is it primarily a supply side issue? You sort of indicate that when you talk about the kind of training you were brought up with. This kind of explanation seems to focus on the role of experts, so elites, politicians.
Yeah.
Are shaped by some kind of Christianity, and then they sort of, as political entrepreneurs, try to sort of get voters on board with their understanding of what the state should be like, or is it more a demand side explanation where sort of the voters themselves are shaped by this kind of ethos or culture and sort of demand their politicians to provide something that's in line with that? So anything that you could say about that would be interesting to hear. And it also, I think,
Can I do this first? Otherwise,
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's a fantastic question. For me, yeah, it's everything. Kind of like it's demand, it's supply side. It is in individual training, but it is how they were brought up by their parents. It is how they went to church. It is how they like this gets reinforced and so on. So, but before was even this much more difficult question. No, where does it all come from? No, I mean, like why was there the split between Lutheranism and Catholicism? And if one reads these biographies and so on of Luther, it's fascinating. I mean, he was a raging guy that he just wanted to make a point. Like he saw it like that. I'm standing here and I can't go any further. And this is and somehow he was successful. Why did he do it? I mean, okay, the reasons would be, he really hated this with the Catholic Church, that you could buy your indulgences and so on, and you could rebuy them, and real crazy stories about it. But I guess he just also wanted to become famous. He really did. So it's, again, a mix out of many different I mean, the essential question, why do religions split, change, and become, yeah, this is way too huge for me, I'm sorry.
So the second part of the question is, I guess, about the generalizability. So depending on how you answer the first part of the question, it seems to me like different conclusions follow from when we look at the future. So I mean, could you do the same kind of study in, I don't know, China, for instance? So different varieties of Confucianism produces different kinds of politics there. I'm aware that you perhaps don't want to talk about that, given that that's not what you actually have done. But could the same kind of methodological approach say something about that? And also,
Yes.
sorry, final point.
Yeah.
Does this in any way sort of support the worry among far-right, radical right parties that the immigration of Muslims, for instance, into Europe will fundamentally change the kind of politics and the kind of welfare state that could be achieved in a European context? I mean, so the kind of framework that you're interested in, does it in any way sort of support the worries that those kinds of parties express about immigration and the sort of mixing of different cultures or religions?
Okay, so first, you can use this approach to whatever, I think. I mean, even to study the automotive industry. I mean, it's not, no, but because it's like it plays on the different levels now, from a micro level, some meso, some whatever. Get as much evidence as you can, and then stuff it in. But so that's possible. Definitely, if you start with the assumption that it's important what people think for what they are doing. And the other one about the immigrants, very good question. I do not think so, because religion is withering away, not because immigrants with another religion are coming. That will basically reinforce the existing religion, I would say. It's withering away because the people get, I mean, ever more, they liberalize themselves away. Yeah, they don't want to have claws on them. They just like, they don't want to go to church. They don't want to. I mean, it's over, I think. Whether or not there can be a radicalization of immigrants' religious thought is different. Might be.
Okay.
Kind of like living in a Sharia type of Ulbeck novel or something like that. No, I don't think so. No.
Happy with that, Marcus?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I'm the follow-up guy here,
Yeah.
but I do it again. And it connects us to Chandra's question. I mean, things are so different in the different countries. I mean, if you take the Reformation in Sweden, it's basically not a religious kind of uprising from below, like it was more with Martin Luther. Now it's really Gustav Vasa acting more or less like a kind of mafia boss. He wanted money, he wanted power, he took it over.
Yeah,
that's basically it.
Yeah.
So that makes a very big difference compared to a kind of more popular movement as it appeared. And that doesn't appear in your part of the explanation either. Again, that's kind of a more kind of, it's a kind of co-optation and opportunistic way of using the Reformation.
Yeah.
Which also means that there's actually a fun story that in the 1850s, they were going to kind of sharpen up a little bit the churches in Sweden. So they went out and checked on all churches that there were no Catholic residuals there. And to their shock, they find a lot of actually Old Norse religious part in the churches.
Yeah.
So it was more like economic forces, I would say, that was driving the Reformation in Sweden, which is very different, I think, from Germany.
Yeah, but or maybe it doesn't matter.
Well, I think it matters quite a lot. That's why you don't get this kind of same.
Yeah, but if they clutter it into some religious type of like selling, then their economic factors.
Expand?
Yeah.
Expand, I didn't understand.
Yeah, so I mean, like, okay, so the factors are economic. They use religion to kind of push this.
Yeah.
It's still religion then. I mean, it's like it's both,
Yeah,
no?
but of course,
It's,
a bit of it,
yeah.
but it's a bit epiphemenal. It's really about
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah, okay, but this is just like, okay, where do you see the motivation for the individual?
Yeah.
Is it material or is it something?
Yeah, also was quite material.
Is it going to heaven?
He wasn't very devout.
He wasn't very devout. In the end, I mean, also for your question in the back, so methodological, what is this? I mean, what I find interesting is to go from elite levels to the population, to the politicians, to the, I mean, everything lines up somehow for a certain part, no? In what they want. And this makes politics run. So
Okay,
that's,
so
I
we have a
find
number of
fascinating.
follow-ups here, so I'm going to take them. First is Eric Molin, so we need to get the mic. Eric, you come here, it's better. Don't hide again. It's your style of hiding behind there. And get the microphone to Eric.
This is a counter to Gustav
Oh.
to defend Josef. Isn't it true that in all cases where Lutheran was adopted as a state or official religion, it was indeed a discretionary choice by the principal in German principalities or in the UK, in Denmark, whereas Calvinism might be a different case in Switzerland and the Low Countries.
I think UK is very comparable, but I'm not sure about Germany. But I will yield to the expert. I think it was less state-centered.
Yeah, he's right.
Yeah. There was state-centered also in Germany?
Yeah, and they switched.
Mm.
I mean, it's like, yeah. Well,
So it was
it's-
taking over the property and filling the coffers and stuff like that.
Yeah, but this was really important that you can take everything from the Catholic Church, and then the
So
many
that talks even
areas.
more to Chandra's point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but like the Catholic Church is nothing. Is also megalomantic power structure, money.
Yeah, but run from
Positions.
the papacy. I mean, there was not connected to a nationalist project in the same way as, I mean, Sweden, as I know better,
Yeah.
was connected to building up a kind of a centralized state.
Yeah.
With controlling power, making the minister into state agents.
Yeah. This was just like getting rid of the Catholic Church.
So that's what makes it. So if you generalize, if that's true about the Protestant part of Germany too, so this is more kind of an economic explanation rather than a cultural explanation. It's not a popular
No,
movement.
you don't lure me now.
Yeah, okay. Chandra, you follow up.
I just thought of another example too. Sorry. Just, you know, take liberation theology. That's Catholic. It seems to me that the issue is what is it you're trying to explain. So, you know, liberation theology caught on for many years in some countries in Central and South America, but it never became the prevalent form of Catholicism. And it seems to me Marxian analysis will give you a good answer to that, to why that is so. Weber won't. So I'm just asking you, that's not I'm not saying that's means your project is not worthwhile. I'm just wondering, what is it you're trying to explain with a Weberian analysis?
Yeah. So, is it really a Weberian analysis? I mean,
You say it is.
yeah, neo. So
Neo.
it's different. I mean, so okay, so the force in this, or what I see as the positive aspect, is that one can follow ideational histories and the sociology behind them, and I don't think one can get that far with a normal Marxian approach, or it would from the very beginning not even allow. I mean, yeah, it would allow to do this, but it would always be like, yeah, but the real reason is behind all this. Put away the wheel here, because the real reasons are some kind of material interests and so on. And I'm more interested in this, like, okay, how did Christian democratic ideology towards the European Union develop? So not only descriptively, but like also all the like small factions within that. Yeah.
Royan?
All right. So one question I have is, because you're talking a lot about the sort of morality behind, or the kind of moral worldviews of these religions, or religious sects. And I was wondering, have you in your work, has it ever struck you that there might be institutional differences between these religious sects, apart from their moral worldviews? I mean, the Catholic Church, obviously a fairly centralized organization, whereas the Protestant churches in Germany, at least I think, fairly independent and fragmented. Because I'm thinking that with all these sort of parochial discussions we have about why Sweden is so different, I do think it is interesting that the Church of Sweden has had such a centralized institutional form throughout all these 100 years, which makes it in some ways more similar to the Catholic Church in other parts of the world. Something, is that something you've thought about? Is that something you've come across in your work?
Yeah, it's very strong. So I mean, like everything that I explained before here was a bit like broad brush and so on, but behind this lies, I mean, to get to this ascendance model, so how you get to heaven, then you also need the enforcing institutions. In Calvinism, you have this very strongly, how the church is then organized, who has which positions. You don't really have a priesthood, but you have the people controlling the other people and so on. So this is like a Foucauldian basic thing, no? In Lutheranism, it's different. It's much more hierarchical with the and the fusion with the state also becomes much easier then afterwards, and so on and so forth. Yeah, this is all. Yeah, we can talk about this for hours.
Thank you so much.
Fun, eh? Eric?
So, as an economist, I don't care so much for labeling things as Marxian or Weberian, but I do care about both materialistic and cultural explanation. I think this was super interesting. You started out by saying that there are these other books. They claim that it's the legal framework that drives it, or it's economic forces or whatever. And then you said you were going to offer a different perspective, and that's fair. But I guess you still want to claim that in some quantitative way, your mechanism, you're proposing a mechanism that is causally responsible, at least partially, for what happened. And then I'm thinking how one would disentangle that from alternative explanations. And I mean, it could be that culturally, I mean, there are even cultural explanations for why the countries that happen to be Lutheran and ex-Calvinist or Protestant, that they are the richer countries in Europe. It could be because partly for cultural reasons, but even if not, they are richer countries. And so it is in Sweden's, Denmark's, the Netherlands, Finland's self-interest to say no to any demand for Eurobonds. And then they also happen to be Lutherans.
Yeah.
How do we, I agree, I think there is a cultural dimension, but how do we make sure it is truly cultural and not just self-interest?
I mean, I will try to run away from this question again in the same way as before, but I think what I find interesting is what do the tabloid newspapers write about the others? Well, they're all thieves. They steal money, and not only since now, but since 15th century, kind of, when we adopted a new cultural framework that made us good and these people bad, and it also helps our economy. Kind of. Yeah, something like that.
I'm fine with
causality is causality.
So, is there any more questions in this fun seminar? If not, join me in thanking Josef for this interesting talk and discussion.